A storm of unprecedented fury has gripped Canada's political landscape, as revelations from a series of hotly contested election recounts have sent shockwaves through the nation, undermining the legitimacy of Mark Carney's recent ascent to the Prime Minister's office. The GG, in a move that has stunned many, has acknowledged the mounting evidence of irregularities, placing Carney's mandate under severe scrutiny and prompting widespread calls for a truly fair and transparent re-election. Mark Carney's victory, initially presented as a definitive outcome, has been increasingly viewed by a significant portion of the Canadian populace not as a democratic mandate, but as an imposition, an unwanted, malfunctioning app update forced upon the country. Critics argue that his premiership is the result of a meticulously orchestrated, hostile takeover of Canada's democratic process, rather than a genuine expression of the people's will. Carney, often perceived as a technocrat and a figure of the global elite, lacked the grassroots support that typically defines a successful political campaign, fueling suspicions that his elevation was a product of shredded ballots, flipped ridings, and a labyrinth of bureaucratic smoke and mirrors. What many are now calling a charade and a carefully constructed circus designed to produce a predetermined outcome, the Liberal Party, described as being held together by duct tape and denial, attempted to legitimize this process as democracy in action. However, for those willing to look beyond the superficial narrative, the truth, they contend, was glaringly apparent. In stark contrast to Carney stood Pierre, a figure who reportedly instilled panic within the establishment. Poilievre's strength, unlike Carney's, was not derived from Bay Street money or global elites, but directly from the Canadian people. Yet, in the aftermath of the initial count, it was not Poilievre who was declared defeated, but rather the Canadian populace, who many believe were robbed. This sentiment has resonated deeply with a public increasingly demanding accountability and truth from their leaders. The murmurs of irregularities, initially barely audible whispers, rapidly escalated into a national outcry. Reports emerged of ballot boxes mysteriously vanishing, and ridings considered strongholds for Poilievre's Conservatives inexplicably flipping in the 11th hour, often with alarmingly thin margins. Mail-in ballots were allegedly misplaced. Recounts were either delayed or outright blocked, and legal observers, tasked with safeguarding the integrity of the process, were reportedly denied access. Elections Canada's response, characterized by dismissive shrugs and press releases that said absolutely nothing, only exacerbated public suspicion. This, many now argue, was not mere incompetence, but sabotage, deliberate and carefully disguised as logistical errors. The most damning evidence cited includes the sudden appearance of ballots days after polls closed, all perfectly signed and conveniently favouring Mark Carney's Liberal Party, tipping the scales with surgical precision. The elites, it is contended, misjudged the Canadian public, assuming they would passively accept the outcome and move on. Instead, Canadians have voiced their deep-seated frustration with power concentrated in the hands of technocrats and foreign-funded influencers, perceived as having no connection to the lives of ordinary citizens. The narrative of Poilievre's legitimate loss has been vehemently rejected by a populace that views the election as theft in broad daylight, leaving a nation once perceived as complacent now wide awake. Mark Carney is increasingly being portrayed not as a legitimate leader, but as a placeholder, a figurehead propped up by Liberal donors desperate to salvage a sinking ship. His public persona, described as possessing all the charisma of a tax form, all the appeal of a spreadsheet in a suit, stands in stark contrast to the populist appeal of Poilievre, who consistently drew large crowds and engaged directly with the public. The skepticism regarding Carney's victory against a candidate who drew tens of thousands to rallies, who shook every hand, who answered every question without a script, has only intensified. His lifeless smile on election night, it is suggested, was not one of triumph, but of a man sitting on a fraudulent throne. The role of the media throughout this unfolding drama has also come under intense scrutiny. Accused of being too busy scrutinizing Pierre's grocery list and fact-checking his every word to notice the largest electoral scandal in Canadian history, the establishment press, including major networks, is alleged to have declared Carney the legitimate winner prematurely, before a single riding had even been certified. They are further accused of running interference, deflecting criticism, and smearing anyone who dared to ask questions, labeling concerned citizens as conspiracy theorists. Now, as the recounts expose glaring irregularities, these same outlets are belatedly showing interest. But critics argue their credibility has been burned to ashes by their unwavering loyalty to the Liberal regime. While Carney operated behind closed doors, Poilievre was reportedly out engaging with Canadians in the rain, the snow, and the forgotten corners of Canada. He is credited with having ignited a movement, becoming the voice of a generation that was tired of being silenced. Poilievre's platform, opposing the carbon tax, housing unaffordability, and censorship, resonated deeply with working families, farmers, truckers, and small business owners. His refusal to bow to the elites and his raw, unfiltered truth reportedly terrified the establishment. The nation's gaze is now firmly fixed on the Governor-General. Will she uphold what many Canadians suspect is a tainted result? Or will she choose to side with the Constitution, the courts, and the people? This moment is being framed as one of historical significance. If the recounts definitively confirm the widespread perception of a farce, then the Governor-General, it is argued, has a solemn duty to act. Dissolve this fraudulent government, appoint an interim caretaker, and call for a fair and transparent re-election. This is presented not as a partisan issue, but as a matter of patriotism, with anything less being a betrayal of the Canadian people. The Liberal Party, it is claimed, is crumbling, with Mark Carney's support eroding rapidly. Whispers of rebellion among Liberal MPs, demands for answers from donors, and a distancing of even Trudeau loyalists suggest a party in disarray, fearing being dragged down with the sinking ship. The fundamental miscalculation, according to critics, was the elite's belief that they could substitute trust with technocracy, charisma with credentials, and authenticity with empty rhetoric. The people, it is asserted, are now rising and will not be silenced. This period is being described as more than a mere political shake-up. It is a transformation of what leadership and democracy mean in Canada. The old system is cracking under the weight of its own arrogance. And while the recounts may have been the catalyst, the fire belongs to the people. From the ashes of what is perceived as a flawed electoral process, a new Canada is envisioned. One where elections mean something, where power belongs to the people, and where leaders are held accountable. This, proponents declare, is our moment.